Hey, it's Bad Dad here from That's Good Enough for Me, and you're listening to another episode of Almost Punk Enough. Today I'll be joined by Scott Pasch. If you've been paying attention to the Hudson Valley punk and DIY scene over the last few years, you've probably seen the name DCPC Live come up again and again. It started out as a project documenting live sets on vinyl, but now it's grown into something so much bigger. A label, a show series, and a consistent presence helping elevate and connect an already thriving community of artists and fans in the region. Now that energy comes together with Rally in the Valley 2, happening this Friday, April 11th, and Saturday, April 12th at Snapper Magee's in Kingston, New York. Across the 2 days, the lineup brings together some of Hudson Valley locals and standout acts from across the DIY world, including the Snorts, Jalen, Trash Diva, Blind Adam in the Federal League, Chemical X, Rebelmatic, The Raging Nathans, World Sucks, My Son the Doctor, Lake Lanier, Thick, Teenage Halloween, and my personal favorite, Soji. It's a full weekend that really reflects the depth and diversity of the scene. Today I'm joined by Scott, the person behind DCPC Live. We're going to talk about the evolution of the project, his role in supporting and enhancing the Hudson Valley scene, and what it takes to bring something like Rally to the Valley 2 to life. Let's get into it.
Yeah, you're punk enough. Oh yeah, that's good enough for me.
All right, so I'm here with Scott Pasch from DCPC, hosting Rally in the Valley coming up on Friday, April 11th. Scott, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today. How's everything going?
Everything is great. Everything is great. I am going to say it's also happening April the 12th. It's a 2-day event.
Perfect. Yes. All right. So right now, being so close to Rally in the Valley, what's going through your head?
Right now, it's like just preparing the idea of getting everything together. So after last year's Rally in the Valley, it inspired me to buy my own backline. So, the venue I use only holds maybe 100 people, 120 for like squeezed in there. And with the back room behind the stage for people to store stuff, it became a problem to maintain time. And I like to put the punk in punctuality. So I was like, all right, this is it. I've got to figure this out. So I bought a backline. So I'm thinking about that. And one of the things I always like to do with bands is feed them, because when I toured Europe, we always got fed. So I'm also coordinating with one of our sponsors, the PD Cantina, to pick up food for all the bands. But I also want to make sure there's food for everyone else as well. So I've been working with Savannah, my production manager, about having a food truck outside. I just ordered some cones on Amazon so I could get the spaces set aside. And most of all, I'm just actually stoked to see all these great bands. Like, I love each and every one of these bands. Um, Seeing them all live before. Almost all of them have had releases through DCPC or have them coming out. So it's kind of like a celebration of the community that's supported and trusted me. Because I think it's a really big deal when a band will trust you to put out their record, when they will say, hey, we are going to give this piece of art that means the world to us, and we're going to trust you to be the person that does it. And I take that very seriously. And then for some of them to be willing, like Blind Adam and the Federal League is driving all the way from Chicago just for the show.
Oh, that's
Nothing
amazing.
in between, nothing headed back, just to come out because of the relationship that we built and the trust and bond that we have. So that's past the logistics. That's really what's in the forefront. I feel very honored to be part of such a wonderful community and have bands be so supportive.
So how is it that you're able to balance the whole hosting of a festival plus bringing a community together? I mean, you're doing a whole lot more than just your average show promoter.
Yeah, I mean, I do regular shows. I did 35 shows last year, and I'll be honest, that's more than double what I've ever done in a year. But nowadays, I have a consistent sound person. Dez does almost all my sound, and he rolls in with subwoofers and monitors, and he's there an hour and a half before the show, and he is just so on the ball. I have two amazing, I call them my backline support staff, Arsenic and Willie. They help me with merch setup, carrying equipment in for the bands. They work the door. As I mentioned, Savannah, my production manager, she helps with prep before the show. She's also my problem solver during the show. I even have, like, from Put Over Photo, he started taking photos at the last Rally in the Valley, and now he's taking photos at every show I've ever done except maybe one. And so I have this like amazing crew of incredibly kind people. I've even had like a message from this wonderful friend, Rachel, who's helped out with some of my benefit shows running raffles. Like, is there anything I can do to help? Or Chris, who I met at Snappers, he's like, hey, I know I'm not being, he fills in for me on door if Willie sometimes is not available. He's like, I know I'm not working today, but can I do anything for you? So I have this amazing group of people that are saying, hey, what can we do? How can we help? So it's really not me. It's the community, it's the punk rock community specifically within Kingston and around that's saying, we want to help you do this.
What was your personal entry point into punk, and more importantly into DIY? What really pulled you in?
Like my first introduction to punk was me listening to a Circle Jerks album. I had returned a Suicidal's Tendency record CD that my parents had gotten me back in like 91. So I was 15 years old. And the person at the Kent Mill Music in Fairfax, Virginia was like, hey, you should check this out instead. And I got to be honest, it kind of confused me. I was used to long songs and blazing guitar solos and things of that nature. And then from there, it was just like, it was right around the time that, Nirvana was hitting and you started seeing like less metal on MTV and more other stuff. And I read this review of Incesticide where it said Black Sabbath getting fucked by Black Flag. I was like, well, I know who Black Sabbath is. Who is Black Flag? So I picked that up. And, growing up in the DC area, I was extremely lucky that every show that I could think of was all ages. So I started going to shows at a very young age. And then I started going like, well, if I can go to shows, I can play shows, looking at the influence of the early Discord bands like Minor Threat and Teen Idols, SOA, they were all kids. I was like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And I even had a really crappy tape record label, in high school as well. So like this whole idea of doing it myself, because I never thought anyone would do it for me. I didn't even know that punk bands did stuff. We didn't have the internet in the 90s. So it took me a couple of years to realize that besides the bands I loved, like Dead Kennedys and Minor Threat, that there were actually still bands still making music that I loved. And I could go see the active bands versus just going to the record and tape exchange and buying tapes of bands that were no longer around.
Awesome. So obviously you left DC and you moved up to Hudson Valley. So what did you feel like was missing in that local scene once you were up there? What did you want to make sure existed for the future?
The scene up here has been thriving. There are so many great people doing stuff. People will tell you that it's mostly a heavy hardcore scene, but I have seen a lot of variance from that. Like one of the local promoters who I love to death, Holly from Outsider Magazine, she's been running this free zine that comes out twice a year for like 20 years. She had taken a brief pause, I think a little bit around the pandemic, and I was lucky enough to come back here right as she brought the issues back and started doing her monthly all ages shows. And one of the first people I met in Kingston was Kev from Wrenches, Rocks, and Bottles. He used to play in a band called Negative Racks. Now it's a band called Rides. He does these great DIY shows. He's got one coming up at the end of the month at the basement of a grocery store. He helped me do my first 2 or 3 shows when I got here because I didn't have a lay of the land. And I don't know that I would have been able to do those shows for my friends on tour without his help. So it was less of a lack of what's there and almost part of like, I run a live album record label. If I'm going to record live shows, I need to put shows on. And at first it was kind of a little sporadic. A couple shows up at El Dorado in Troy, maybe 1 or 2 at Snugs in New Paltz. Then it just kind of grew as people, I guess, began to trust me. As I just became part of the scene by showing up. I showed up, I introduced myself to people, and they very kindly accepted me. Bands like RB&X were always so gracious and kind to include me into their world. So I don't think there's anything lacking. Do I do things a little bit differently than other people do? Yeah. I put a big emphasis on always having a couple out-of-town bands in instead of doing local showcases. And I also put an emphasis on often having mixed bills. I feel like that's kind of a DC thing. If I say, not to sound like a cliche, but in DC, you would have like a go-go band and a hardcore band on the same bill. I don't quite go as far as go-go because there's no go-go here. But I will have like ska bands and grindcore bands and an emo singer-songwriter all on the same bill because I tend to believe most of us like more than one thing. And not everybody agrees with that, and that's their thing. But I've been told that my shows are generally pretty cheap, between $5 and $10, and I usually do a not a fluff if it's too much. Um, that they'll come to a show that's $5 and there's 5 bands. And I was like, well, I liked 4 of them. One of them wasn't my thing, but they put on a good show. And for $5, how am I going to complain? And like I said, my shows are always start on time at 5 o'clock. My Sunday Snapper Magee shows that I do once a month and tend to end between 9 and 9:30. So it's a great night to come out, drink some cheap beer if you drink beer. If not, drink some cheap water and watch 5 bands for $5.
That's awesome. Yeah, and the whole idea of a diverse set list or a diverse band list. It's how we all discover so many of our Saves the Day, for example. That they're one of my favorite bands, and I wouldn't have known about them if they weren't on tour with H2O.
Exactly. It's part of the whole like I'm going to like Not Croydon Fest at the end of the month, and I enjoy Not Croydon Fest, but it is 3 days of nothing but ska. And I love ska, and I love ska punk. But at the same time, I wouldn't inherently mind if occasionally there was something else thrown in there just to like give me a taste of something a little bit different. But I recognize that I'm going to a festival dedicated to that, particular thing.
Right.
That's why Camp Punksylvania tends to have a little bit more variety. The Fest, I know there's a Fest sound, but Fest will have metal bands and hardcore bands on the bill. So I kind of like it when I can go see more than one thing.
Absolutely. So are you still chasing the bands, or are the bands starting to come to you for the monthly Snapper show?
I get a little bit of both. The problem is like I book like 4 months out, and I tend to try and do a local opener or local closer with 2 or 3 bands in the middle from out of town. And my first year I started doing shows at Snapper. So it was January of last year to January of this year. I only repeated a band on their Sunday shows once.
Oh, wow.
So I really try hard to keep it diversified. And I do think about what might draw people out as well. So like, I think on some level, I'd like to say that people come out to the shows because they know that a DCPC show is going to be good. That being said, it doesn't hurt to have bands that I think will bring people out as well. So it's kind of like that balance. And I have this huge spreadsheet and I add people to it. But sometimes it's like luck of someone messaging me and at the right moment saying, hey, I need a show in August. I'm like, oh, luckily I'm booking August right now.
Nice.
And so it's just hard to get to everyone. And I actually moved those shows to being all benefit shows now too. So it's part of like, mutual aid. Like I said, I mentioned Kev before. Kev does a lot of those, and it kind of goes back to me being a civics teacher. So I don't inherently pay the bands on those Sunday shows anymore, but I do feed them. So it's a little bit more restrictive. Especially with gas prices going up as they are.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's part of the punk rock ethos, I think, that bands are usually still willing to drive 2 or 3 hours for a worthwhile benefit to play a good show. If they know they're going to play to 40 to 70 people and get fed and hang out and see a lot of other great bands, I find most bands are still willing to do that.
Yeah, good crowd is a good vibe, so everyone's into that.
Yeah. I know I would rather play to 50 people for no money than play to 10 people for $50.
Yeah. So we're just going to take a real quick break, and then we'll be right back with a little bit more with Scott Pasch.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Thanks for waiting for us. And so Scott, with DCPC, it's a lot of live records that you're putting out, almost entirely live records. So
almost entirely until this year.
Until just the last 2 months, right?
Yes.
So why did you choose to go that live route, and what makes it more meaningful than a studio release would be?
Well, like many things in life, it happened by accident. DCPC had started as me being from DC and my bass player being from Port Charlotte. And we decided, since we both used to book shows, we would book shows together. And we started booking shows in Florida when I was living down there. And we did like an Anti-Queens show, maybe 1 or 2 others, but I think that may have been the only show we did before the pandemic shut us down. And then we switched to doing a live stream, of course, with our own band and another great band called Too Immature. And since we were doing it out of Danger Room Studios, we figured we might as well record it. And I'm a big fan of those old VML live records of the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, let's put it on a 7-inch. Let's make it the same covers and homage to them. And we'll do one record and see what happens. And then it just kind of kept going and going that way. And I was either finding bands to record, or I was reaching out to bands like the Goons from DC, who had a live album that came out, on CD in the 90s, but it never come out on vinyl. And I said, hey, can we reissue this? Or a CDR of a live album from Two Man Advantage from Long Island. And, part of it's the history teacher, right? Like, an album gets recorded often over the course of a year. People go in, they play, they overdub, they come back. But a live album is that moment. It's that moment in time that happened, and it's caught for posterity. I think Ian from Discord used to always say that, like, they were documenting the DC scene. And I'm not so regional as that, but I think I'm documenting live DIY music. And that show mattered, whether it was 5 people or 500 people that were there. I have been to shows where I'm only one of 5 people, but there was nowhere else in the world I'd rather be at that moment than watching that band right there. And I think capturing that and saying that this moment happened in its rawness. That being said, I think the live albums I put out sound really good. It's a constant battle I fight the assumption that live albums suck. It's quite easy nowadays with studios to, like, travel, like Josh or my buddy Des up here will bring all the recording stuff to a show, and it's very easy for them to hook up to their laptop and record straight in and have all the stems. So it's not like the old days where you're putting one mic in the center of the floor and just recording everything and hoping it comes out.
Nice. So how hands-on are you if Mike's doing it on his laptop? How hands-on are you with the releases themselves? Are you a little bit obsessed? I feel like I would be obsessive about it.
Yeah, I mean, so, like, I am listening to everything that comes in. So, like, I just got tracks in the last week from Chemical X, Pucker Up, Lake Lanier, 2 of which were playing Rally in the Valley. And, like, I have listened to their, what you would call them, their rough bounces of Lake Lanier and Pucker Up, and they're amazing. And I'm just waiting for Des to mix them. And we just got the final masters for Chemical X. So, like, I'm intimately involved. I listen to everything. We always send off the rough bounce, and then it's always a decision as to, with the band mostly, to decide if they played well enough. I'm always confident in the quality of the recording. Sometimes bands will just decide that they had too rough of a night for whatever reason, and that they don't want to put it out, which is fine. Sad, but fine. But I also want to make sure everything sounds good. Josh from Danger Room in particular, if you see the reviews we get in Maximum Rock and Roll and Razor Cake, and MRR tends to hate everything. Consistent across the board is always, these sound good. And not just for, like, live albums, they sound good. And I really want to maintain that reputation.
You're well on your way. These the records that have all been quite fantastic. I'm a big fan of the Winter Wolf Soji split. So
thank you.
Looking forward to the camp coming up soon. What separates a good show from a good scene?
I don't know. I mean, I guess, like, I've certainly gone to shows and said that was a really good show, but had no connection to the scene, in the sense that I've been there and I was a total stranger and didn't know anyone and didn't even inherently talk to anyone, but I enjoyed the show because what happened between them on stage and me and the general atmosphere of the audience was still there. I mean, is it possible to have a good show without a good scene? I don't know, because the show is more than the band on stage. I'm just processing this out loud here. Like, the show is the band on stage, but the band on stage is responding to what's in the audience, and how the audience responds and how they treat it can make a difference, and how they respond to certain types of bands. Like, I can remember to this day, I think I was going to see, I want to say it was Rancid, and the Toilet Boys were opening, and it's the 90s, 95, 96. And I remember I just made a friend. I'd started community college, and the kid I'd made friends with, like he joined a bunch of, I don't know, I guess I would just call them assholes who sat down and turned their backs and put their middle fingers up because they were offended by the effeminate way the toilet boys dressed and the gender bending sexuality that was going on, the gender fluidness. And I was like, huh, I feel like if we were a good team, we wouldn't have done that.
Right.
Or we would, or someone would have done something about it. I mean, I think most of us just ignored it. I wound up just not speaking to that kid after the show. Like that was it. We were just not friends anymore. I was like, all right, if this is how you feel, I tried to talk to him about it and got nowhere. I was like, okay, well, I don't really have space in my heart for that kind of friendship. There's too many people I want to meet in the world that believe in kindness and respecting other people. So I think that's what makes a good show, because I often do bring not just diverse sounds, but despite the fact that I am a, like, straight white cisgender male, I'm pretty much everything except for a Christian. That's the default of America, right? But I try and bring like BIPOC bands and queer and trans bands. And I'm not trying to say that's all they are, right? I'm not trying to pigeonhole them and say that's their identity. But I like to think that having different people up there, other than what I've heard most of my life, is a powerful thing. And if a community doesn't support that kind of acceptance, inclusiveness, like one of my secrets is we are heart-led inclusive space. Like I really want people to come in and feel safe and feel like they can be who they are, that even though it's not an actual queer space like the Unicorn Bar in Kingston that I do shows at and stuff, you don't have to have a queer space to feel safe as a queer person.
Wonderful. So obviously you're very intentional about creating a welcoming environment and not just letting things happen naturally. You take the bull by the horns, for lack of a better word there. So has that been the case for you since that Boys show? Have you really gone out of your way to?
I would like to say yes, but that probably isn't as honest as it is. I certainly maintain the same belief structure, but I don't think I booked with as much intentionality in my younger years. In my younger years, I booked bands I liked, bands I met, and I certainly did include or exclude bands that were more diverse, but I don't think I set out with the same level of thoughtful intention. I think it's just part of growing as a person.
Yeah. So you ran 35 shows last year.
Mhm.
In addition to living in America during all the horseshit that's going on and being a history teacher, and a civics teacher, so you kind of have that backdoor look into how things are not supposed to be versus what we're seeing. So how do you not get burned out doing all of this and dealing with what's going on?
It's pretty hard. So right now, I'm actually getting my PhD in social studies curriculum, with a focus on using graphic novels to engage in ethical representation and historical empathy. But I have, I was a civics teacher for years, and it's really hard to not see that. I think that's part of the impetus for why I followed the example of people like Kev, and brought out the mutual aid, and I'm trying to do things in a different light. I mean, it may even be because of that I've tried so hard to be so inclusive. It's like when you are being confronted with so much exclusion and so much rhetoric that I find to be harmful and hurtful. Well, I mean, I could hit back with anger, but I actually have a Frank Turner song tattooed on the back of my neck that says "Be more kind." So, like, instead of turning towards being an angry, yelly person, which I can be, I decided, I was like, I'm just going to turn towards love, and I'm going to make the spaces I create now the exact opposite of what I see happening outside of these spaces. I'm going to give this a place where hopefully people can come and feel that they're welcome and comforted, and that they can come and have a good time, and they can circle pit and scream, but also hug and laugh and cry and feel supported.
How much of your punk youth and punk current were you able to bring into the classroom?
More than you would think. It's funny. Most of my students knew that I played in a punk band, but that's why I went by Mr. P. For some reason, they couldn't figure out that to find out what band I was in. They said to Google my nickname instead of my full name. I wore a mask on stage so that I could have plausible deniability. I always told the kids, your parents might like Eminem, but they don't want Eminem to teach them. So, it's not a matter of like what I'm doing is cool or not. But, I think I brought the punk ethos of deliberative thought that I learned. Like it's hard, growing up in DC not to be political, not to be active. I was probably in ninth grade, maybe younger, maybe a little older, somewhere around there, when I went on my first march against the PMRC, Tipper Gore and all that. I mean, so it's kind of just part of who I am. It's why I studied political science. Part of it was to write better punk rock songs. Instead of just yelling, fuck the government, I wanted to say, let's talk about how we handle our taxation system or how we handle our economic affordability and the disparities between classes. Kind of like propaganda, like more thoughtful oriented stuff. So yeah, I think I brought it in there. I mean, the one band I mentioned, Too Amateur, I taught their drummer how to play drums. And when I was his teacher in 9th and 10th grade, and so he is now in a punk band. So there's certainly been some influence of kids that I've taught that are now doing their own music.
That's awesome. And you've gotten to book them, obviously. So you get to see that whole full circle moment for it. So that's got to be very rewarding.
And I even had bands come once. At the one school I taught at, I had Jeff from Divided Heaven play and Joey from the Briggs. And a couple other bands would come through on tour. And I would say, hey, can you come play my school and do an afternoon show outside on our gymnasium floor?
Oh, it's awesome. My high school, my senior year, we actually had Bigwig do a benefit in the auditorium, which I can't imagine ever being allowed before or after. It fell in at the right time and worked out real nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So we're just gonna take another real quick break and then
Sure.
we'll be right back. All right, thanks for waiting there, Scott.
No problem.
So you locked in on Snapper Magee's. What is it about that venue that's really the home for DCPC?
It's part of it is the staff. Before I moved here, I came up for O Positive Fest on my way to visit various colleges as part of my do I want to get my PhD and change my whole life tour? I went to Snappers and I met Eva, the bartender who's still there. She's fabulous. And you just look at the place. They have posters, Hub City Stompers and Hudson Falcons. And, it's just everywhere. Like this is a punk bar and they should be doing shows. And they did one show that Sunday that wasn't connected to O Positive. But then when I moved here, they were like, the owner at the time was like, no, I'm not really doing shows anymore. And I thought that was just really sad and unfortunate. And then they sold it, and the new owners were like, no, we're just going to do DJs and stuff. And I was like, I really want you to do shows here. And it took a lot of talking. And then, I had Keep Flying play Snugs in New Paltz. And it was like, it was a late night show. And on a Sunday night, I had easily 100 people in there. And I took video, and I took it to Snappers. And I was like, hey. I showed it with the owners. I'm like, look, between 5 o'clock and 9 o'clock on a Sunday, you've got 10 people in here. I can guarantee, 5 times that amount, plus the bands are going to be here as well. So,
absolutely.
Okay.
All right. So obviously you've got the rally coming up and how did that idea go from maybe we'll do this one day to now we're doing this?
It literally came about. I was flying down to Florida to record Florida Underground Fest. And it was like December of last year. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do it quite like Florida Underground Fest does, where they have 3 or 4 venues. But I think I could pull this off at one venue. Now, keep it in mind, I hadn't even done my first show at Snappers yet. So I'm already assuming that my first show in January is going to go great and that they're going to allow me to turn it into a 2-day event the following, 3 months later. And I'm like, oh, I got to pull this all together now within just a couple months. And, part of the reason I call it the Rally in the Valley and not a fest is that for me, I feel like a fest has to be multiple stages, if not multiple venues. People often have an 8-band bill and call it a fest. It's like, that's really just a long show.
Mhm.
So Rallying the Valley, I think, speaks to what I'm doing. We're rallying around together. We're in the Hudson Valley. Um, I do hope one day to get it to like be bigger and have multiple venues or multiple days. But it just worked. And I got a little smarter this year and I started planning back in September. So, how much you plan, it's hard because bands can't decide right away. And then
Right.
if a band does decide in September, let's be honest, life happens and bands will have to drop off for one reason or another because they they mean it when they say yes in September, but something happens in life in March that they have to bail because it's life. And I
Mhm.
respect that. I actually booked one more band that I wanted on each day on the anticipation that one band would drop off each day, and that's what happened.
So, other than making sure that you overbook or book to be prepared, how do you approach the booking? Because you do a great job with balancing the local bands with the diversity, and then with the bigger names like Rebelmatic, Raging Atheists, and Teenage Halloween.
I mean, part of it is I'm extremely upfront. So like people will, when I was in a band, they'd mention like, hey, do you want to play a show on this date at this venue? And they wouldn't tell me anything else. They wouldn't tell me what time it is, any other bands. So like I am super upfront. I was like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is when it starts. This is, what I do for like food and hospitality. These are some of the bands I'm asking. I have a back line. I feed the bands. Um, you know, if it's, on, let's say non-rally based, I'm bringing a band up here. I was like, I can make sure you have a certain amount of money. If you let me know what you need, we can talk about it. I have a professional sound person. So like, if you just tell them all this information in advance, it lets them know that you are really on top of your game. So they'll take you seriously. It's the same way like I'm the booking coordinator now for Unicorn Bar in Kingston. Not generally punk rock and ska stuff. I do that through DCPC, but the other stuff that they like to do there. But when I started helping, I was like, the first thing you do when you reach out to booking agents is they need to know the pertinent information.
Mhm.
What's the size of the place? Is it all ages? Is it 21 and up? What are your average ticket things? Like the more you tell people up front what the situation is, the more likely they are to be able to respond with clarity versus, yeah, we're going to drive 5 hours to play some random bar in a random city we never heard of for a guy we never met. I mean, it can work. Some people say yes to that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would also say like part of what's made it easier is like I mentioned, put over photo. The photos he takes after every show make my shows look so amazing.
So
And when I share
Aaron's
those with
one of
fans,
my
I'm like,
favorite people on earth when it comes to that. Same thing with Face. I think
yeah,
that
Face
Dave
is
is
amazing too.
absolutely brilliant.
Yep.
So I love looking through their shows and seeing all the shows at Snappers because of what they're doing.
Yep, they do great work. And then I also have Lunapic does great work and Mexican Property. So like between the four of them, they make the shows look so amazing. So I throw a couple photos in there, give a list of bands. Like, but it was slow, right? Like I had to build up the reputation and convince people that it was worth their time. And then word spreads. Bands talk to us just like, hey, we had a great show there. Scott was really kind. He treated us really well. All the bands were really good. The sound was amazing. The sound was amazing is also very important.
Right.
Like I have driven on tours and driven 8 hours and played a show where we sounded like crap. And I remember it was my second or third show. I think it was my second show I did there. Mike, he's the head barber across the street at Pugsley's. He used to play in a band called Jerk Magnet. He came over to Snappers, and him and I were talking back by the end of the farthest end of the bar near the door. And Dez, he does such a good job of doing sound that you can be right up there and you can hear it and feel it, and it's everything you want the show to be. Or you can be the far end of the bar and you can actually have a relatively normal conversation without any earplugs in, and you can just talk. And Mike was like, this band sounds really good. I was like, yeah, they're a good band. He's like, no, they sound really good. I was like, yes, they are a good band. He's like, no, you don't understand. I've been coming to shows here for 20 years and I've never heard this place sound like this. What are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm paying for it. I pay for a phenomenal person who gives me a great deal, by the way, for what he does. brings subwoofers and monitors, and he can handle inner ear monitors and 4 DI boxes, and he walks around with his iPad. He's locked in, and he gets excited when things sound good. Like, he's the kind of sound guy you want, where he's obsessive about making it sound good, but he's not rude or nasty to anyone about it. Like, he is there for the show.
Nice. So obviously that overhead comes into it, and you keep your tickets pretty reasonable when it comes to your shows. So how are you able to pay for the food trucks and pay for the bands and pay for the sound and all of that? And why is it such a non-negotiable for you that the prices remain reasonable?
Like I said, part of it is accessibility. Like, I was already bad enough that the shows aren't always all ages. The least I can do is make sure that they're affordable. For the rally, I've got a lot of great sponsors. I could hit all of them, but I don't think I could. I had at least 10 event sponsors and another 10 community sponsors. They're all up on my website. Everyone, they're great people, and I thank all of them. For my regular shows, sometimes I just lose a little bit of money. But like, as I tell my wife, I was like, if I drove to Philadelphia to go see Soji, I'm going to have to spend the night. I'm going to spend gas and toll to get there. I'm going to buy my way in. I'm going to probably have a couple beers. So I'm going to be out $100 to see Soji, maybe 200. If I can bring Soji here and I'm out $50 at the end of the night, and I saw 4 other bands and create a community, that's okay. It's fine. Not to be a businessman about it, but probably nothing advertises my record label more than having great shows.
Yeah.
So
when this coming weekend is over, and what's it going to take for you to feel like the rally was a success? Like, how are you gonna relax afterwards? What's the plan?
Relax? I don't even know what that means. Like, literally afterwards, I have like meetings with 3 different bands for records, and then I have a show at Colony in Woodstock on Thursday. So it's just right back into it. Then a show in Brooklyn the following Saturday. Success. I don't know if the bands are happy, if the people are happy, if everyone just had a great night and community was had. And, I've never had a fight at one of my shows, so I don't even think I have to worry about that sort of thing. It's a positive atmosphere. So I'm just hoping people come out, they have a great time. The bands feel like they were heard and respected, and everyone feels like it was a good night. I don't know. I'm excited. Like, I'm starting on Friday with my birthday because I turned 50. So it's like a whole weekend of me just hanging out with the punk rock family that I chose, and my own family too.
That's amazing. So happy early birthday.
Thank you.
What's next for DCPC?
What's next? It's hard to say, right? Like, I'm going to be at Camp Pennsylvania coming up soon, and I'm going to be recording another stage for another live comp. So that will be awesome. I'm talking to another festival about doing something similar with them. As you mentioned, I did break into doing some studio albums. Wasn't something I had planned to do, but sometimes you get presented with records just sound so good. And I know the people so well and trust and love them and respect them so much that I'm like happy to do that work. And, I struggled with it because I kind of put up this barrier in my head. I was like, no, that's our niche. We're going to stay within our niche. And I don't really try and advertise that I'm doing studio, even though I'm talking about it now, because I don't want every band in the world reaching out to me, because I'm not going to do it. This is not going to happen. I only have so much bandwidth, and so much money. I'm already booked with releases through this year. Like, as I talk to bands now that I might be recording coming up, like, nothing's coming out until 2027. It's a good 8 months for me to get a record out. Just based on
That's
time.
not a bad turnaround, though.
No. I mean, my pressing plant can get it done in like 8 weeks. It's more of a matter of me trying to space them out. Last year, I got a little crazy and I released 20 records in a year. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know. It was crazy. It was too much. I mean, the biggest problem with that is, like, it's already a hard slog to get people to buy a record online. 'Cause you're saying, hey, come buy it online, pay $5 for shipping, maybe pay taxes, and wait, 2 weeks to get your record. or go to the record store right now and spend maybe less money and get the record right away. So I recognize that what I am is a small niche label. I am lucky to have a distributor that helps sell stuff, and then of course bands sell stuff, and that helps. But it's I'm not making money hand over fist. Let me be honest.
So when you look ahead 5 years from now, where do you want to see DCPC? Where do you want to see the Hudson Valley scene?
I mean, I want the Hudson Valley scene to continue to grow. I would love for there to be a more all ages venues. Like I mentioned, the Unicorn Bar does stuff. They're all ages, but predominantly ska for the most part. They love ska a lot, or everything. Or it's like a queercore band. And Reason and Ruckus in Poughkeepsie is fabulous, and they do all ages shows. And Holly does them down in New Windsor. But I would just love for there to be an all ages spot in Kingston, and I'd love to be somehow part of that if I could. I don't know exactly what that means. Years ago, I worked with Charm City Art Space in Baltimore. I was very tangentially associated when they started up. I was certainly on the email list and was there every now and then helping like get it together, but I really didn't become an active member until like, the promotion part. But it was this great all ages spot that did like a zine library and a scholarship for the community college, and it was nonprofit and collectively run. That sounds fascinating to me. It's just, do I have the do I have the time? Do I have the time? What am I going to prioritize? Shows, albums, festivals, my family.
The next step in your education career. Yeah. I mean, you've got a lot going on.
It's hard to rank. 5 years is a really long time. I didn't think I would be here 5 years. I mean, 5 years ago, I was still living in Florida and teaching middle school in a hybrid format because people were still like pandemicking. I did not know I would be up here in the Hudson Valley doing shows and getting my PhD. So I'm just going to say, hopefully I'm still doing something connected with DCPC and people are still supportive of what I do. And it's still a positive thing.
It's been very positive so far. And we're all really looking forward to the next steps in the evolution there. So last question here. It's kind of your chance for a big elevator pitch. If somebody's on the fence on going to Rally in the Valley, what are you telling them?
Are you kidding me? You're on the fence? It is $10 each day, 7 bands and then 6 bands. And I'm talking like the Raging Nathans coming from Ohio, Rebelmatic coming from New York City, Blind Adam and the Federal League driving all the way from Chicago, Trash Diva from Baltimore, Jay Lynn from Philadelphia. It's almost all out of town bands. The only local bands are opening the Snorts on Saturday and World Sucks on Sunday. It's got Lake Lanier. I mean, it's Soji, Teenage Halloween, Thick. They're a band on Epitaph. I had them coming to play a little dive bar in Kingston. Come hang out. See a band, at least 3 or 4 of those bands that played the main stage at Camp Punksylvania. Come see them on a small venue because you won't get that opportunity much longer. So these bands should not be playing this venue, most of them. Let's be honest.
Right, awesome.
I don't know how it's happening, to be perfectly honest with you.
It's because you take care of them.
Yes.
It's those food trucks.
So trust, like I said, trust is built. But I mean, I literally have 3 or 4 bands that are, Camp Pennsylvania main stagers. Why are they playing a 100 capacity dive bar in Kingston, New York?
All right, awesome. So once again, it's Friday and Saturday, April 11th, April 12th. You've got a total of 13 bands on the bill, and total of $20 can get you in for both days.
Yeah, it's that easy. Come, hang out, have a great time. And the shows, doors at 3, music starts sharp at 4, should be done by 10 o'clock. So even on like a Sunday, you can still get home at a relatively decent hour. It might even be done by 9 o'clock on Sunday.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. This was great. Really
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you.